I mean, something you said before that resonates with me is, in the last 5, 6, 7 years, I've personally been really struggling with investments in terms of real estate. You're like, it doesn't pencil. It doesn't make sense. I have to look at myself being like, okay, am I just being ultra cynical at this point? Am I 10 years ago, I could really make any investment. And it was like, oh, this just works. I analyze myself a lot. I'm like, did I just not know enough back then where I was just taking the risks and I was being profitable? And I need to kind of get back to the basics of just, getting out there and making offers and analyzing things. But I haven't been able to, because none of it makes sense. Even the middle class housing and the fast track program and the MLI Select on a 50-year M, I'm like, it still doesn't pencil to me. But how are people doing it? I'm a little bit paralyzed being like, okay, on one side of me, there's obviously people that are still doing this successfully. Why can't I do it? But, if someone like you is also taking a back seat to it and, taking a completely different approach than other people, maybe that's the room for opportunity.
I think it's a bit back to what we talked about before with housing, right? Which is everybody starts talking about it and thinks it's the right way to do it. It's amazing to me. I hear people that, I hear really bad stories about the builder they used to build their house. And yet I'll be out in public with them and they'll start recommending their builder. So I think it goes to that safe face, right? And so I think it's like real estate, right? I mean, we had a guy in our world, he'd come to me and say, oh man, I should do this. Well, okay, maybe you should. He's like, yeah, I go to soccer and I talk to this guy at soccer and he's building the spec houses and he makes them whatever and he hardly works. Oh, it looks really good. Okay, sure it will. Until it doesn't. I mean, I've been saying it for probably 7 years, maybe even longer, 2018, 2019. It's just saying that the fundamentals are wrong. And when somebody that works here and makes a decent living can't afford to buy a home here, something eventually has to give. And I think, the whole COVID and all the extra money that came into the economy through the government at that point in time extended it for a couple of years. But, we can see it snapped, right? It's broken. And most people in the industry, you guys too, weren't here in 2008. And you certainly weren't here in 2003 or 98. And, as good as I probably look, I was here for all of those. Joking on the first part. And I think people have forgotten that there is always this major correction that happens because of momentum. When everybody's doing something, we all want to do it. And it's hard to say no when it's not. So, just what you're saying, just when all your friends are buying houses and flipping them to a year later and making a buck, you're going, geez, I missed it. Those are some of those guys that were so smart. They bought one and they flipped it. They bought two and they flipped it. Now they bought three and they can't sell it. And now they're sitting on, real estate they paid $3.6 million for that's worth 1.8. So it's why there's all these signs around town. And, back to what I said before, the math doesn't work. The bigger problem I think we have now in the scope of the market is that when I first started, especially, land cost was probably 30 to 40% of a deal. Taxes are now 30 to 40% of a deal. And I'm talking municipal and DCCs and PST and GST and all of these things. And the land has come down to being in the 10 or 15% range. So even if I could buy the land at half the price it used to be, it still doesn't pencil because it's still not enough to get a margin that works. When it was 30% and the price could come down to 15%, there's 15% margin, great, I can move that project forward.
Yeah.
But if it's tight and you're going from, 4 or 5% to 12, it's still not enough to move the needle.
So crystal ball, obviously you've seen, the market, you've seen that cycle. Where do you think we are right now? Do you think, we're in the bottom? Do you think we still have further to go? Obviously, geographically, we just want to kind of focus on Kelowna, kind of single family houses. We can stay away from condos probably because they're getting crushed. But what would you do as an investor? In opportunity in the next 5 years, where do you see the market going?
So again, invest your money. Don't speculate.
Yeah.
So, if you can look at a deal and you can make a 4% return on it and you're happy with that 4% return, because it's still more than you're going to get it if you put it in a GIC, go for it. But if the only reason you're buying it is because you expect it to earn and change in value over the next few years, then you're doing it for the wrong reasons, in my opinion. Are you going to buy SpaceX stock when it comes out? Or are you going to buy the TD Bank? Right? The TD Bank has a history of paying dividends and going up over time. Yeah. SpaceX will go like this, and then it'll do, again, it's momentum, it's hype, it's all of this stuff.
Yeah.
And housing was our hype. It really was. I went to a presentation by an economist not so long ago, a month or two ago, and I thought he had a really good chart. And he showed the top coming in, I think it was 2022, 2023. He was saying that, it was really a combination of mass immigration, we got really low interest rates, and we got all the COVID money. And when all of that changed, we've dipped. I don't know where the bottom is. I still believe that, again, the hype over the last 7 years, especially when you talk about the condos and those bigger projects, has been driven by fees. And so what I mean there is it's driven by developer fees, builder fees, real estate fees, mortgage broker fees, all of those things to keep the engine flowing. And people were putting money into real estate like it was never going to be a problem. And when that money stopped flowing in, there's been a reckoning on all those projects. And you've got funds that have stopped not only disbursements, but you can't even get your money out anymore. It's because they're not liquid enough. They don't have cash flow. They were never investing, they were speculating. So where does that come? I don't know. I mean, it'll be interesting to see. I've had several conversations with bankers lately, and I've just said, how come you guys aren't taking more projects back? We don't want them. As long as they can keep feeding us the interest only, we'll keep the finance in place, because otherwise, what are we going to do with them? Right? We don't want those empty units any more than they do. At least this way we're making money. Where does it come back? I think it comes back. We do need a correction, and I don't think building costs are going to come down enough. Plywood costs what plywood costs. I mean, I guess it's somewhat cyclical, but pipe costs what pipe costs, installation costs what it costs. Wages are probably going to go down substantially. We'll get a bit of a drop because people will be more competitive in bidding. Sorry, back to the economist. What he said that I thought was really smart and interesting is that basically when you have a cycle, is you basically have to wait for wages and inflation to catch back up with what things cost. And so what does that look like? And he put on the 08 recession, he put on one in Calgary in, I can't remember, the 90s, I think, and something in Ontario from the 90s too, I think. And, those cycles were between 7 and 12 years till it got back to where it was. And so, if it was 2022, are we in year 4 of that? I don't know. Are we in year 3 of that? The beauty is Kelowna's always been slightly isolated from that. Yeah. Right? We're still a good place to live. But if I'm a framer or a nurse or a whatever, working in Kelowna, and I got to spend $1.2 million on a house, and I can go back to Calgary or Medicine Hat or Lethbridge or Red Deer and buy the same house for $350,000 and make exactly the same money. It's too high a price to pay to live here. Right? We've always had that sunshine tax piece, but so I think the sunshine tax spread needs to come down before we get that massive influx again.